thanks to all the folks from the Hill who joined us today. That's always great. There's a lot going on here. These topics have always been important, but now they're getting interesting. Ben Evans is actually going to moderate.
Well, thank you, Clay, and thanks everybody for sticking around for the. Can you hear me okay? For the closing act. I think we'll make it worth your while. So again, Ben Evans with the Alliance to Save Energy, Vice President of Government Affairs and Communications. And if you follow the Alliance's work over the past year or so, you know we've been on a bit of a crusade around energy efficiency tax policy, and more specifically the lack of energy efficiency tax policy. It's been a bit of a personal passion of mine, and I think for good reason, because when you look at what we're doing with tax policy in the energy sector, we've really been going about it the wrong way for quite some time. We have spent decades really putting into place these very generous incentives for the production of and development of new energy technologies and new energy sources, nuclear, coal, oil and gas, wind, solar, biofuels, you name it. If there's a major energy source out there that is probably benefiting or has benefited from energy efficiency tax incentives at the federal level, and in many cases for good reason. You know, we want to shore up our domestic energy supplies. We want to develop cleaner technologies, cleaner energy technologies. But what we have ignored, largely ignored, is the flip side of that equation, and that's the demand side, and trying to ensure, encouraging people to use that precious energy and the valuable energy that we're developing as efficiently as possible. So much so that over the past 2 years, until Congress passed a bill in December temporarily reinstating a few incentives on efficiency, we had no tax incentives in the U.S. tax code for energy efficiency for the past 2 years, except for a relatively niche incentive around combined heat and power in the industrial sector. And yet no one is really talking about that. All the tax discussion is about a lot of other things. And so it can be a little bit frustrating at times to try to wedge into that conversation. It reminds me of an analogy that a man named Bertrand Piccard used at an event of ours a couple of years ago in Copenhagen. I know some of you were there. And he if you're not familiar with Bertrand Piccard, he's a Swiss explorer and clean energy advocate, who, among other things, is the first person to fly an airplane around the world purely on solar power. And by the way, he when he talks about that, he says the most important aspect of the success of that project was the energy efficiency of the air. We don't need to dwell on that now. But anyway, he has this analogy of the energy system being a bathtub that has this big hole in the bottom of it. And everyone's scurrying around trying to find new sources of water to keep the spigot on and keep the bathtub full. And we're spending all of our money and all of our energy on that, and we're doing nothing about the hole in the bottom of the bathtub. And I think that's certainly true when you look at U.S. energy policy and energy efficiency being undervalued as an energy resource, and nowhere more so than in the tax code, where we have this just gigantic imbalance in what we're doing to encourage supply of energy versus what we're doing on energy efficiency. And this is particularly problematic when you look at the climate situation. You all have read the studies around how we're going to address climate, and they show we're not going to get there. We won't meet even modest climate goals without significant increases, major increases in energy efficiency. And we know that tax policy is one of the most effective policy levers we have to do that. Look at what it's done for some of these other energy sources and the growth and development of some of these energy generation sources. And really, it should be a bipartisan endeavor. When you look at what both Republicans and Democrats are talking about on climate, what they want to see, they want to see solutions that can drive carbon reductions at scale, that can make a big impact and create significant reductions, that do so in a way that is economically positive, in a way that's not going to hurt industries, that's not going to cause elimination of jobs, and that's not going to drive up prices for energy and goods and services that could hurt particularly folks in lower and middle income households. And on those criteria, energy efficiency knocks it out of the park. So with that, I don't want to go on for too long. Why don't we do some quick introductions. You have bios in your programs there of all of our speakers. So we'll do some brief introductions quickly and then get to some Q&A. So Lauren, why don't we kick it off with you?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am Lauren Urbanic. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. We are headquartered in New York, but with offices kind of all over the place, including in DC. I'm part of our Climate and Clean Energy program. We work a lot with federal policy. I also have a pretty robust shop that does some state policy work. I specifically focus on building energy use, and that translates most of the time to building codes and appliance standards. And happy to be here. I'm excited to talk tax.
Thanks, Lauren. Adam?
Hey, happy to be here. My name is Adam Letcher. I'm president of Fifth Fuel. We're a home performance contracting company located in Manassas, Virginia. What home performance contracting is making existing homes or light commercial more efficient and comfortable. We do that primarily through air sealing and insulation. That's what we do.
My name is Brian Howard. I'm the legislative director for the U.S. Green Building Council. Besides being a customer of Fifth Fuel for some home performance needs in my own property, and I'm not aware of that before this, but really happy to have them here. If you would talk about the shop for what it's worth. But in my role with the U.S. Green Building Council, I work as the legislative director, which is primarily on federal activities, but I also support some of our state and local enterprise. Folks mostly know us as the LEED certification rating, which is a look at efficiency, renewables, and a number of other performance issues that exceed or go beyond kind of baseline codes. We do work in all 50 states, 160 some odd countries, give or take depending on the day. We have certified as of last year 100,000 registered and certified projects through our rating system. So I'm happy to talk about energy incentives and the role they play in certification, and then just other baseline performance issues.
Thanks, Jay.
So I'm Jay Monger. I'm the owner and president of XL Heating and Cooling, a small family-owned contracting company in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Here representing the Air Conditioning Contractors of America. We primarily are a residential company that focuses on service and replacement. And a major passion of mine is quality installation. With studies coming out showing how up to 40% of equipment can be installed incorrectly and lose those benefits of energy efficient equipment, it's become our passion to do it right and do it well so that we improve the indoor environments for our customers. And we want to work with all of you to try and make installation a major part of what we look at going forward.
Great, thank you. And before we get to Q&A, I should note just a little bit of a quick background on the kinds of incentives that we traditionally have had for energy efficiency and what we'll be talking about today. So typically over the past 15 years, what we've had are three main incentives focused on the built environment. One is the 25C tax incentive that gives homeowners up to a $500 tax credit for making efficiency improvements to their homes. There's also a 45L tax incentive that is for home builders, up to $2,000 tax credit for home builders to build more efficient homes if they have to meet a certain efficiency performance up front. And then there's a 179D tax incentive, which is for commercial buildings, up to $1.80 per square foot of commercial buildings, making lighting, HVAC, and envelope improvements. Those incentives have been on again, off again, very inconsistent. The value of the incentive is not very much, and we'll talk a little bit about what how that plays out in the market. Last year, we worked very closely with, I don't know if Jay Weissmuller is still here, with Senator Hassan's office, with Jay, with Senator Hassan's office, Senator Collins, and Congress Representative Gomez, Representative Kelly, to introduce bipartisan legislation that would modernize and update those residential energy efficiency tax incentives. We've also spent a lot of time working on how we can improve and expand the impact of the 179D commercial tax incentive because it has a lot of limitations. It does some things well. But mostly when we're talking about efficiency tax incentive, we've been talking about the built environment. The Alliance also very much supports things like the EV tax credit that we heard a little bit about earlier. Not necessarily an energy efficiency incentive per se, but it's certainly something that will drive a lot more efficiency into the transportation sector. We also support the industrial tax incentives, things like combined heat and power in the industrial sector. But the expertise we have here today and what this conversation will sit around is the built environment. And we'll start on that point, Lauren. Why is that so important? Why is the built environment so important that we get it right, and particularly from a climate and environmental perspective?
Yeah, so, buildings are responsible for about 40% of carbon emissions. And that's, think about that. We talk about transportation and industry, they're each responsible for about the remaining 30% each. So, like Ben was saying before, you really can't get to any type of progress on climate, on reducing carbon emissions, on fighting the climate crisis without really tackling the building sector in a major way. And energy efficiency, it's the most impactful, but it's also cost effective way to reduce energy use and especially energy waste in buildings. So I really like the bathtub analogy. A lot of times energy is literally just flying out the window or the walls. And also, as I was saying, tax incentives, they're really one of the federal government's primary, if not kind of only ways to influence, that's a little bit overstating, but one of the best ways to influence consumer and business decisions. And we have this massive portfolio of existing buildings. Pretty much every building that exists is an existing building, and most of them, if they were not built in relatively recent years, have lots of opportunities for energy savings in terms of upgrading insulation, putting in better systems and equipment, but it's really hard to convince people to do that kind of thing. Brian was talking about the home performance energy work on his home. I've had it done on my own home as well. I live in a 100-year-old house. Until I moved in 2 years ago, it didn't have any insulation in the walls. So that's the kind of issue that we're talking about. But I did that for comfort, but also because I know about the benefits of this. But when we're talking about the general public, what's going to change their mind, what's going to influence them to go that extra step, it is things like tax incentives. So, and it all comes back to this issue of reducing energy use as a way to reduce consumption, burn fewer fossil fuels, and reduce the carbon impacts.
Yeah, thank you. So Jay and Adam, you both are concerned with the residential side. So a lot of the 25C tax incentive that homeowners can use. Talk about how that plays out in the market, particularly given that it's constantly expiring over the past couple of decades. What kind of an impact that has when it's on again, off again, and then also the cap, the limit of $500, and that's a lifetime cap. So once you've hit that $500, you can't take this credit anymore for the rest of your life if you're a homeowner. You want to give it a start?
So the 25C tax credit, it's very beneficial. It usually gets people to make the leap. Everybody wants a discount, and especially with the industry we're in. It's not like HVAC where you need it, you have to have it. If you don't have an air conditioner, you can replace it. People are primarily calling us because of comfort issues, and it's an investment. They have to put up the money. If you have just a small incentive, and not $500 is necessarily small, but relative to the size of the job, it's usually enough to push them forward. The one handicap that we've had with the rebate or the tax credit is that it's a one-time thing. So most people have been in a house for any amount of time have had to use it. So when it first came out, it was a larger part of a sales pitch. Whereas now, I would say 1 in 5 people hasn't used it. So it's a benefit thing. You can use it. It usually will push them over the edge to go ahead and follow through with the job. But then again, it's been off again, on again, off again, on again. So it's made it a little bit difficult to use as a sales tool, and the fact that it's only a one-time shot.
Jay?
Yeah, and I would say the on again, off again has been a real struggle for us with that. This year, we didn't put it into our sales literature going out because it's late in the year when it was coming around, and the uncertainty of how long it will be there. The retroactive has been tough on contractors. For myself and other contractors in the industry, we're having to dedicate resources from our staff to go back and help people look up what they bought in 2018. So rather than being able to proactively include it and to help incentivize them to make energy efficient decisions, we're now going back to give them rebates for behavior that they already took place, and it's a lot more work to do it for a system that was 19 months ago than one that we're installing next week. We find that the amount and the cap are a little bit difficult. If you've had your HVAC system replaced in your home, it's not inexpensive, and the jump from the lowest allowed level of efficiency up to where the tax credits are often end up in quite a bit more money than what a $300 tax credit will do. Combined with the fact that in the life of a home, probably replacing your HVAC system, every 12 to 18 years, depending on various factors within it. So that one-time $500, it really doesn't go very far.
And so I should point out that there's a $500 lifetime cap. Many of the product categories are also capped at certain levels. So, for example, with air conditioning, it's capped at $300. So as you're talking with people, I imagine it differs between air conditioning and insulation and envelope work. What are the kinds of challenges you run into in getting customers to adopt higher efficiency? What are the obstacles that are there, and how do you try to overcome them?
Well, we end up, a lot of people, when we start talking about efficiency, they want to know payback. And they want to know payback in dollars. If I'm going to spend X more dollars for this system, how quick am I going to be able to make that payoff come through? That's a really difficult thing for us to actually quantify within it. There are various studies that show different savings, but we don't know everything that's going on in their homes. So we can't sit and promise a 40% reduction in energy when we didn't know that there was a jacuzzi down in their basement that they ran every week. It absolutely destroy our ability to cut their energy bill by 40%. So, we try to look at a combination of energy efficiency that also equals comfort, because we're focusing on the way that equipment is installed, making sure the ducts are sealed, making sure that the system is sized correctly so that we're getting good indoor air quality for them, and that they'll get a comfort that goes along with that energy savings.
Yeah, I probably have the same take on it. Primarily, we'll sell on comfort, even if someone calls us out, because one of the primary concerns is the efficiency of the house. When it comes down to it, it's very difficult to quantify the exact savings on BTUs or kilowatt hours without doing an in-depth study, which costs you more than you're going to save on the actual work. So while the impetus might have been for some people, they want to decrease their carbon footprint, what you'll typically sell on across the board is going to be comfort. Most people have comfort issues. And in fact, the majority of people who call us out, they're not calling us because they're trying to decrease their energy use and of their efficiency, although that's a byproduct of what we do. Primarily, people are calling us because it's too hot upstairs. It's too cold downstairs. My kids' bedrooms are nice. So primarily, we're called in on because of comfort, or we sell because of comfort. But efficiency is definitely part of what we talk to when we're trying to.
Jay and Adam, back to the residential side, what kind of an impact could these incentives have if they were extended, let's say long-term, 5, 10 years, and you knew they were there, and it wasn't $300 for an air conditioner, but it was maybe $700. The bills that we introduced last year, that were introduced last year, would have raised the lifetime cap, for example, to $1,200 from the existing $500, and would have put them in place for at least a multi-year extension. There was some negotiation over that, but what we were shooting for was at least a 5-7 year kind of extension. To get them in place. What kind of an impact do you think that would have on your businesses, on the economic activity around retrofits?
I know from experience back, years back during the stimulus rollout, they had the incentives were quite a bit larger, and it was drastic the amount of work that came in at that time. And then when the money dried up, the work dried up to a lesser, greater extent. The benefit of having them both, define the distance, you can go out and market them, and then also the amount being larger just allows you to structure your whole sales process, your whole marketing process towards them, whereas without that framework around it, it's difficult to use that.
Yeah, I would comment the same thing. You know, when we start raising that amount and making it a consistent one, we know our marketing material isn't going to become outdated, you know, with a bill that then presents or doesn't present or that part of it. Being larger helps when you're looking at, you know, what can be $1,500 to $2,500 to jump from that base tier up to the, you know, the qualifying equipment within it. With a larger incentive, we start to actually motivate people to make that decision into it. You know, we saw the same thing in the results from the larger tax credits, but the caution that I would put is that we also spent a lot of time in the years afterwards going and cleaning up from contractors that did poor installations. So there were ways to make those efficiencies that included certain types of equipment that were just installed wrong and actually increased the amount of energy use that homeowners had from prior to their previous equipment. So I think a big part, if we do go to the higher amounts within it, some piece of quality installation component should be there to ensure that the homeowners are getting what they think they're getting, you know, both from a comfort and energy saving standpoint.
You're referencing the increased incentives during the stimulus bill
During the stimulus.
and what kind of, and you saw the impact of that.
We saw the impact of it, and then we saw the downside of it as well.
Lauren, let's talk about new homes. Obviously, buildings, one of the reasons buildings are so important, they're going to be in use for 50, 100 years, whether they're existing or new. People are going to use them for a long time. New home, the 45L incentive, talk a little bit about why we need that and how it also interacts with things like building codes. You know, we do have energy codes for buildings, for homes. Talk about the interaction there and how the new home construction is going to work.
Sure. Yeah. So there is a building energy code that new homes and new buildings are required to meet. It's developed at the national level, but not by the federal government. And it's been fairly stagnant on the residential side for a while. We've made some good progress actually in the last iteration of the code, which is the 2021 code. But the important thing about the building energy code, like any building code, is adopted at the state level, or the jurisdictional level. So to some degree, it doesn't matter. You could have the best model code in the world, but if it's not adopted and it's not enforced at the local level, you're not going to get the energy savings. So the 45L tax credit is one of those that is pretty outdated, and we think that it could use some real restructuring to make it something that's more effective. But it has been structured and continues to be structured for the time being as an incentive based off of a heating and cooling reduction based on the 2006 code. Like I said, we just finished developing the 2021 code. So even at its face value, it's a pretty outdated incentive that's really not, in a lot of places, is not incentivizing builders to go above and beyond much what they're already doing. So that, you know, and why do we need an incentive there? Why can't everybody just build to the best code? Like I said, the fact of the matter is that it's just not happening in certain jurisdictions, and a properly structured tax incentive could pull along would incentivize builders that are inclined to do it right and do it better, and then pull along those that are a little bit slower to adopt. And that just makes it much more simple, you know, if there is a market for some of these things, much simpler than to get those types of improvements into future codes, which then does eventually trickle down over time to all new construction. So an important incentive, because like I said, new construction, new buildings become existing buildings right away. We don't want to have to go back and touch them again.
And that dynamic that Laura is referencing there is consistent across a lot of these incentives, and there's a lot of congressional staff here. One of the reasons these incentives need to be updated, it's not just that the incentives are sort of little money and inconsistent, it's that in many cases the efficiency performance that has to be reached is 10 or 15 years old and hasn't been updated. So what was an energy efficient air conditioner in 2005 when these things were originally created isn't necessarily an energy efficient air conditioner today. So unlike some of the other extenders in that package of bills, these need to be regularly updated to keep up with the technology and make sure that we're really getting bang for the buck, getting efficiency bang for the buck. And that's certainly true with new homes. So I'll ask one more question, and then let's turn it over to the audience for see if you guys have questions. Looking beyond the existing incentives, if you were, the majority leader or the House Speaker and could write new ones as you wish, what would you really focus on? What we really need that would, if you could, make them up from whole cloth, that would really drive the kinds of games that we're talking about, getting in deep retrofits and things like that?
I think from where we sit, I think it's probably three things. So in terms of the new construction process, for new construction, residential and commercial, we need an incentive for net zero ready or net zero energy. Obviously not to double dip on the renewable energy side of that, but if we're trying to meet the goals that we're trying to get to, I know that there's a number of various different parties that are looking to really do significant decarbonization. We're seeing a number of states who have been putting fairly ambitious goals about clean energy grids by 2050, 2030, 2040. Then pretty much we can't do new construction that is not either at renewable or at net zero or near that process. So however we start that, and obviously making them quite lavish would be great. I think secondarily, and something we've already talked about, but in the existing buildings market, we need probably a more significant process than what we have now in 179D, and whether that's a really significant increase in the incentive levels, and then looking at potentially prior performance as an approach or baseline performance improvements. So there's been something that Senator Cardin a number of years ago had introduced in that space. That certainly is a really interesting process to get more people into that marketplace and get movement quicker. I think another idea that has been considered and I think is working its way through the process is looking at specific applications in commercial real estate or attributes through kind of the QIP process. I think could be areas that are meritorious for additional work, and I would look at specific component issues. But if you bundle those together, those also get pretty significant energy savings, and then again residual benefits as it relates to either environment activities or health, safety, and comfort.
So that's a go to the QIP process, the qualified improvement category of properties that was created in the 2017 tax bill. There was actually an error. The 2017 tax bill did nothing for energy efficiency, and in fact made it worse in a lot of cases where a lot of retail and restaurant properties were switched from to a longer depreciation period for investments in heating and cooling and refrigeration equipment, almost a 40-year depreciation period for that equipment versus a 10 before or bonus immediate expensing. So just made it more expensive tax-wise to invest in that kind of equipment, and that's an error that is still lingering out there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, building off of what Brian said, which I agree with wholeheartedly. Like I was saying before, we really these types of incentives need to be incentivizing the types of behavior that we want to see, and with a focus on decarbonization. So I think that part of that, we've done a good bit of work of what do you do to decarbonize a building, and it's efficiency plus using the right fuel, which in a lot of cases, most cases, is going to be electricity in the future at the right time. So incentives that do focus more on technologies like heat pumps for many applications in the water and space heating space, I think are something that we would like to see, along with meaningful dollar amounts like you've heard about from a number of these in terms of actually changing behavior. Also something that's easy for taxpayers and contractors to implement and understand and take advantage of. And something that we haven't talked about so far, and perhaps it's a bit outside of the tax realm, but consumers that are lower income, and how do we ensure that both, if it's either tax incentives or things like weatherization are available and accessible, and making sure that like you've heard before as well, many of these are expensive, and often it's the consumers that need this type of improvement the most for their comfort and health and safety are the ones that can't afford it. So I don't want to lose sight of that when we're talking about all of this as well.
And a particular problem there as well in rental properties where you have a split incentive where you maybe have a landlord who owns the property who doesn't want to make efficiency improvements and a tenant who pays the electric bill. It can be an issue. Any other additions on what you'd like to see if you could write the rules?
On that note, I know in Virginia there's a grant program through some of the utilities. And it's age and income qualifying. So lots of times you have these large apartment complexes that are individually metered, so the people renting them are paying the bills, but they don't own them, so they don't have any incentive to increase the efficiency, and the owner of the building doesn't have any incentive to increase the efficiency of the building. So this grant program makes it so that we can go to the building owner and say, hey, we're going to improve your building. At the same time, it improves it for the tenants. And then what you find with that, is what she spoke to earlier, is it's age and income qualifying. So a lot of these people are on a very fixed income. So if you can make, what to your average American would be, not the world of the difference, but if you can make that difference in their monthly budget, it's huge. We've had people come out, we're doing the next building a month later, just thank us because it makes real improvement in structure.
Yeah, I mean, the energy bills, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's something like lower income households spend something like 7% of their income on energy compared to, typically, 1 or 2% for people in upper middle and upper incomes. Please do.
And I think the one piece, if I was correct in legislation, to include some sort of third-party certification. We love ACCA's certification for quality installation. The building code is the bare minimum, and honestly, on a retrofit, some of the jobs our inspectors have told us don't even call in because it's just you're changing out the same thing for the same thing. And we don't have the resources to come and go through it. And when they do, it's typically a cursory, looks good, thanks, have a good day. Tying that to the quality installation, if you're a company that believes in quality installation, you're going to spend more money training your guys, you're going to spend more money on the job itself. It's going to take longer to use good refrigeration practices, to do things correctly, to evaluate and seal the ductwork. And obviously that cost gets passed on to the consumer. If we could get that tied to the tax credit so that people would know that when they did it, they were actually getting an energy efficient system rather than based upon the quality that was done where you don't know. So I think tying that to some sort of standard would be